Welcome to the Lawless Astrology channel. My name is Dabney and I'm an evolutionary astrologer. Today I'm really honored to have back one of my first guests that I ever had on the Lawless Astrology channel. His name is Ronnie Pontiac, and he is an incredible astrologer. He is a philosopher, he studies spiritualism, he's a teacher, and he just has such an interesting background, but so much good perspective and so many wonderful things to say. And we're actually looking at the big picture. And we are looking at what has been happening, why it's been so toxic, but also there is a lot of reason for hope. And people always ask me, when is this going to end? And, is it going to be okay? And Ronnie's going to give us a little bit of his thoughts on that. So, first of all, I just want to say welcome, Ronnie.
Oh, thanks for having me back. I'm glad to be here.
It's just lovely to see you. And if you want to get in touch with Ronnie, he has a Substack, he has a YouTube channel, and he has an Instagram. And I'm going to put all that information below in the description. He is an author and he's written some books, and he just published a book recently that is available. It is fascinating, and there's a whole series on YouTube that he has done that mirrors the book. So it's really worth checking out. It's not astrological in nature. It's more esoteric and about the spirit world, but it's fascinating stuff. So if that interests you and you're interested in Ronnie's work, you should check it out. So I'm going to actually change things up a little bit, and I'm going to put it on a different view. So I'm not here as much because I really just want to hear what you have to say, Ronnie, because you have a really great perspective. And also, last thing I'm going to say, um, I do want to say that he does a weekly horoscope that tells you what's coming up for the week energetically, and you can get that on by subscribing to his Substack. And so I get that in my inbox. I'm no longer on Instagram. I was like, I can't do this anymore, but he posts it on Instagram as well. So, okay, I'm gonna stop yapping. Ronnie, what's been going on in the world, the cosmic world, shall we say?
All right. Well, hello, friends. So here we are in 2026, and we have been suffering quite a few years here, haven't we? It's rather surreal. It's my opinion that 2026 is a big turning point. One way to think of this is that the 20th century has had a kind of death grip on the 21st century, which is not uncommon when the centuries shift, and this was a millennium shift. I believe that now we're going to start to see the themes of the 21st century emerge. We still have a little bit more difficult astrology to go through, and I will talk about that. So I'm going to look at each of these events in chronological order and give you some sense of what the landscape looks like. But before I do that, I want to tell you that July of this year has some astrological aspects that are just simply amazing and very positive. They're unlike anything that's happened during our lifetimes. And although from this perspective here, it's hard to imagine what that might mean, words like renaissance and rebirth are not too strong for what this astrology suggests. So let's jump into this. So the first big thing has already happened. It happened at the end of January, and that was Neptune finally left Pisces. And Neptune has been sitting or had been sitting in the last degree of the zodiac for the last couple of months of 2025 and for most of January. And that degree is infamous for being apocalyptic. It's the final degree of the zodiac. And that gives you this sense of endings and of doom and of a nostalgia for the past, but also a desperate sense of stagnation. And it also, because Saturn has joined and had joined Neptune in Pisces, this was a time when traditionalism and specifically Christian nationalism was very much empowered by the astrological placements. So from now until May 21st, 2038, we're journeying through a new zeitgeist of Neptune, Neptune in Aries. So Neptune in Aries is a fresh start. This is the end of a very long Neptune journey through the whole zodiac, 165 years. The theme was civil war when it started, and the theme here at the end is, not surprisingly, a kind of civil war again. We're looking at issues involving racism. We're looking at issues involving women's rights. And these were issues in the beginning of the cycle as well. So these are kind of loose ends that are returning, being tied up in a sense. We're getting this view of how much progress we've made in some sense and how little progress we've made in other sense. But if you look at the difference between the beginning of this Neptune cycle and where we are today, let's remember that in the beginning of it, women couldn't vote. Uh, Most black people in America were enslaved, and there was a real violent civil war that killed thousands upon thousands of Americans. We're not really in that bad a situation. Our hope is that we're not going around in a circle, that we're on a spiral, and that we're on a higher level of that spiral. And it does look to me that way. I think that the astrology this year indicates that optimism is warranted. So, Neptune in Pisces, it was escapist, emotional, as I said, apocalyptic, especially in that final degree. And it was there since April 2011, favoring traditional ideology, cult as community, propaganda, conservative elites, as I said, especially Christian nationalism, the past seeking to hold on to power at any cost, including delusional efforts to just turn back time, to just force things to go back to how they used to be. We now have Neptune in Aries, and Neptune in Aries bursts out like spring, bringing radical new approaches, fresh ideas, and maybe most importantly, new generations that will step up to adjust course in a direction more to their liking. This redirection is likely to be aggressive and confrontational and impatient, like Aries. That doesn't mean there won't be a continuation of many of the overwhelming problems society faces today, but there will be fresh energy and a collective decisiveness about the fact that things must change for the better. And we're already seeing that. There's more energy and aggression among those who are resisting. Think back and compare this January and February so far to last year, when it wasn't until Cory Booker's filibuster on March 31st that we saw any sign of resistance. People were in shock and suffered a prevailing sense of futility in the face of an onslaught of gaslighting and reckless politics. Now we have a lot of energy out there, a lot of protest, a lot of people who are demanding change and are organizing in the grassroots. It's very different. And that's just the beginning, because this is only one of many changes coming this year. So this Friday, Friday the 13th, until April 2028, Saturn will join Neptune in Aries. And Saturn in Pisces, again, reflected much of Neptune in Pisces, including this authoritarian kind of Christianity. Saturn in Pisces, melancholic, old-fashioned, institutional, autocratic. Control becomes more important than compassion. There are antiquated opinions of another era that rise up to demand conformity in the name of a so-called greater good, but really it's just to benefit the elite. Typical Saturn in Pisces type of activity. Saturn also, however, exposed the lies and the shocking crimes at the heart of our culture's current ruling class. The combination of Saturn and Neptune together, as they finally have an exact conjunction on February the 20th, is a time of maximum pessimism and collective exhaustion. A crisis reveals that the government is inept and can't really respond. That's a very common phenomenon with this conjunction. This could be weather related, could be drought or flooding, contamination, could be an epidemic or an earthquake. But these could just be metaphors for a society in turmoil as it realizes that it has to rescue and reinvent itself. So Saturn comes along and all that Neptune, all that fog, all the lying, all the manipulation is suddenly reduced to facts. And we're seeing that happening constantly in our feed as we find out more and more shocking details about what these supposedly Christian elites have been up to and what their plans are for our future. Saturn really reveals all that. We're so close now, just a couple days to Saturn in Aries. Again, a whole new Saturn cycle of close to 30 years. The cycle that is now ending began in 1996. And if you recall, that year saw the Olympic Park bombing in Atlanta during the Olympics. It's when Benjamin Netanyahu was first elected prime minister of Israel. So there he was at the beginning of the Saturn cycle, and he's still here at the end of it. Trump at that time was pro choice, but he began talking more about politics, especially immigration. In August of 1996, the first formal NYPD and FBI complaints against Epstein were made by the artist Maria Farmer, who reported that there was a child trafficking ring that he was in charge of. Now, just imagine if something had been done to stop that, how different American history would be and how different the present would be. But unfortunately, nothing was done. And yet, here on the other end of this Saturn cycle, Farmer and her sister are in the news again as they join other victims demanding justice. So we can see how these cycles bring up issues, and then if they're worked on, they can be resolved. But if they're not worked on, they come back again. So what began in 1996 ends now. There will be a furious attempt to resist those changes, but that effort to stop them will evolve how Saturn operates, forcing it to start over, to update to new circumstances. And I believe that we can expect a new definition of conservatism and of Republican to evolve over the next decade. There will be a backlash, I think it's inevitable, among Christians themselves against political corruption and coercion by politicians who have cloaked themselves in the label Christian, but who will be judged by their actions. Delusional Christians who relish hatred and who consider empathy a weakness will be confronted by a Christianity seeking to reform its identity, a movement probably driven by young people. Neptune in Aries suggests even greater popularity for non-traditional spirituality. The desire for a personal revelation or communion with the divine may capture America's attention, as it did during the time of the New England Transcendentalists in the early 19th century, in the spiritual revolution of the 1960s, and during the New Age movement in the 1980s. So expect to see more interest in astrology and non-traditional forms of having a spiritual path that helps you become who you were meant to be, as opposed to what we've been seeing, which is this attempt to impose from a hierarchy rules that we're supposed to conform to, other people's definitions of what is right. Aries doesn't care what other people think. Aries is about individualism. And so it will be a major shift with Neptune and Saturn in Aries, big difference. On February 20th, we get that Saturn-Neptune conjunction that I mentioned a moment ago. In the first degree of Aries, I mean, this is so symbolic. It's the first degree of the zodiac. This is a rebirth. It's a new beginning. This is a very rare thing, by the way, in astrology, to see this conjunction at the first degree of Aries. We are so lucky that it is not in the last degree of Pisces. It would have been, I think, a lot nastier if that were the case. And in a sense, this is the grand finale of Neptune in Pisces, even though Neptune has already shifted into Aries. That aspect can indicate depression, economic constriction, a collective malaise, problems involving water, as I mentioned, mass emotions that act like storm weather on the psyche of the masses. So, one thing I would suggest is don't attempt to plan for the future from this vantage point. This is the end, it's not quite yet the beginning. And meditation can be very powerful now. Saturn and Neptune favor meditation. It's also a really good time to lean into yoga or Tai Chi. Any kind of body mind practice can be very helpful now and will be helpful as we navigate these big changes coming up this year and next. For some of you, and you know who you are, this is the time to give up any and all intoxicants so that your body can heal. Neptune is intoxication, Saturn is limitation. So if not give up, then moderate. You do not want to be leaning into the intoxicants, into escapism. You want to find more productive ways to deal with stress that help you to stabilize and get grounded. We've all been battered with so much propaganda, so much stress, and we need to return to the body and to give our bodies what they need. So you want to establish good habits now of eating and getting rest, and you want to be enjoying nature and spending time looking at the things that you can appreciate about your life, simplifying and keeping in your heart and soul the knowledge that things are going to be turning better as the astrology begins to support a much more sane kind of a society than what we've been dealing with. For the lucky few, there's the opportunity to potentially create a masterpiece. So if you're somebody who's creative, the inspiration and the imagination are there with Neptune. But the Saturn gives you the power, if you put in enough discipline and enough practice, to capture that inspiration, that imagination in a beautifully structured way. So if you're a creative person and you're working on something special, really focus in on that. And meditation will help you to be able to really do justice to what you're attempting to bring out into the world. It's also a good time to learn to gently control our emotions so that we can be free to be creative. This is a big problem today because of social media, where we're constantly getting assaulted every time we sign on by a feed that is filled with outrage. And we see things that really tug at our heartstrings, and then we see predominantly old men, on there putting their laughing emojis, ha ha, to those kids who are out there protesting, and it makes us angry. That just takes away from your ability to work on your health, to be creative, to support your family, your friends, and your community. By all means, stay informed. But at the same time, Saturn is asking us to know when to put limits in. We only have a few more months of this Saturn Neptune challenge, and it's been with us for quite some time, flirting with this exact conjunction. It was very strong in July. It was almost exact in 2025. You can look back then and see what kind of issues may have been coming up for you and see how you've dealt with them and if you need to return to them. But while we're here, it's a good opportunity to work on the power to relax away from these issues, to not be driven by the stress of them. These years that we've been suffering from this madness and feeling helpless about it, take a moment here and use this next couple of months to chill, to redevelop a sense of groundedness, and to find what really matters to you and stick to that. Don't spend this time finding reasons to be depressed, finding reasons to give up, finding reasons to feel futility. And don't you doubt for a moment that there isn't a concerted effort to do that to you, to make you feel futile, to make you feel that there is no recourse. This is what is, they call it the shock doctrine. And this is what has been going on and what they're trying to do. But you know, America and Americans are not your average society that in the way of response to shock doctrine. We are very resilient, and and you can already see that happening, as I mentioned, as we're seeing such a strong reaction where a year ago we barely had any at all. That's going to continue, and there will also be a continuing attrition for those who are pushing this false narrative as more and more of them suffer the consequences of this reckless policy, and as more and more of them find it increasingly difficult to justify their positions because of the truth, the facts that are coming out. And with the help of AI, there is a deliberate effort to muddy the water, to get people into a position where they feel like, well, I can't believe anything's true, so I'm just going to stick to what I like. I like Trump, and I don't care what anybody says, that kind of thing. That is not going to wear well over this year and next. And you will start to see cracks in this kind of huge unity that Trump was somehow able to conjure. He does have a very interesting chart, by the way. He is someone who is closely connected with the American chart. And it's my belief that he is, in a way, the incarnation of the American shadow. And since we've been living through America's Pluto return, when it was time for America to confront that shadow, I think that he was the means for us to do that. And he's attracted to him like a whole galaxy of criminality that will be laid bare. And we will not be helpless. We will have a response to that. And I promise you that just the pendulum swings that far in one direction, it will swing the other way.
So, Ronnie, I'm going to interrupt you for a second, if
Sure.
that's okay. I just want to kind of, because I think you gave me a completely amazing opportunity to let people know that on the Saturn Neptune on February 20th, I'm going to actually be holding a free workshop for anybody that's interested. And there'll be details about how to sign up in the coming days. But you can subscribe to my mailing list, and that information will be below. And you'll learn that we're going to have this sort of energetic purge. We're going to like get this out of our bodies. Because I was talking to Ronnie before we got on camera. It's been a decade of so many of our lives where we have just been held captive in so many ways energetically. And it's time to cut the cord. It's time to get this energy out of us. It's time to transmute it. This is an opportunity for a fresh start. So we're going to be kind of ritualizing an energy clearing for all of the energy that's really hooked us, that, you know, has to do with things that are just not ours to contain. And we're going to do some guided meditation. We're going to have guests. So we're going to have a lot of really amazing people, and it will be a free workshop. We're going to have some charities you can donate to, just so you can feel as if, and then that'll be optional. And then just so people can feel a sense of, yeah, no, we don't need to be hopeless. There are things that we can do, and this is the first step. So I just wanted to interject that before you went on, because I felt like what you were saying was so perfectly aligned with like this kind of statement, which is all it's meant to be, which is like a clear statement of like, yes, that's then, this is now.
I think that's a wonderful idea and very appropriate. And I suggest if you can't join this, do something similar yourself. Take time to make that clean distinction of intention. So the next big change that's going to happen will be in April. And that is on April 6th when Uranus enters Gemini. And that will be there through May 2033. On one level, this certainly heralds the era of AI everywhere. I think AI promises to be a double-edged sword. Those who intend to use it to oppress and coerce, I think will be shocked to find how easily it can be used against them. And I believe that there will be young geniuses from the Pluto and Sagittarius generation, and we'll talk about that in a moment, who will find ways to do what was thought impossible. They will use these tools of domination against the dominators. And Tamara Lucid, my partner, she used to say that AI is the deepest mirror human beings have ever invented. And I think that is the truth. And human beings are an ornery bunch. AI is already proving itself tricky, devious, and sly, so like us. And so I do believe that AI is not going to behave in the way that the people trying to control it believe it will. And there will be ways, as Gemini shows us with that two-sidedness, right? The twins. You think you're doing this, but then there's this other thing going on. And I really believe that these younger generations who have grown up completely immersed in this technology environment in ways that even the billionaires who created these technologies have not, are going to find ways to use them that will be subversive to any kind of autocratic impulse. And I'll explain that when I talk about the Pluto and Sagittarius generation in a moment. So Uranus and Taurus is what we've had. And that is always, if you'll pardon my French, a shit show. It's always consistently been a bad time. And it brings constant threats and anxiety about the things that we count on for comfort and security, food distribution, the economy, heating for our homes, our stability undermined, leaving millions of people vulnerable and in shock. It is the shock doctrine in action. Taurus is stubborn, seeing only its own priorities, very one-sided. And so we have an administration and its supporters who refuse to consider any picture of the future but their own self-serving and very short-sighted vision. That is unfortunately typical of Uranus and Taurus. And so we have had all of our stability shattered during this, but it's ending in April. So what can we expect from Uranus and Gemini? To begin with, Uranus is much more comfortable in Gemini because Gemini allows for multiple sides of an issue to be seen and understood. Gemini loves collecting facts and communicating. So undoubtedly, this also indicates the revolution in communication and technology that AI is bringing on that will be both liberating and disruptive. It will increase human discernment, however. And you're already seeing much dialogue among people about how do you recognize AI? And many individuals are saying, I know when something's AI, I can tell. And they keep saying, well, AI is going to be so good you won't be able to tell. And yet people continue to be able to tell. And that's because of this increase in human discernment. It's also inspiring a return to analog technology among some younger people. There are quite a number of younger people who are dropping out of social media and they're turning back to old technology like cassettes, for example, for audio recording because cassettes can't be tracked and they want privacy. So the only way to get it is to reject the new technology. I do think that AI is going to greatly improve medicine, and there will be incredible scientific discoveries. But of course, there will also be big mistakes and potentially tragic mistakes, the loss of jobs. But this influence, I think, will be helped by Gemini because Gemini likes to gather the facts and quickly make necessary adjustments. So there will be this constant, whoops, okay, let's fix that. And we're going to have to get used to that. It's going to be a little bit stressful. And we should learn not to just focus on the bad news, but also on the good news that is happening because it will transform our world. And these astrological changes happening in 2026 will make where we are right now seem kind of quaint in a not too distant future. That's how big the technological changes are going to be. Um, the last time Uranus was in Gemini, to give you an example, we saw leaps forward in technology. There were simple household innovations. They invented Velcro and kitty litter and Tupperware and freeze-dried coffee and color TV and Kodak color film and aerosol spray cans and the first microwave oven, which was 6 feet tall. We also saw the first programmable computer and rockets and jet airplanes, the transistor and synthetic rubber, but also, of course, nuclear bombs. But you can see from that list, and that's a very short list, this was a time when the difference between the world before Uranus and Gemini and the world after is really striking. We recognize a lot more of this early Uranus and Gemini, which was in the 1940s, than we would of the earlier period before that, where planes were all propeller planes and a lot of the technology that we take for granted didn't exist. Now, there are a lot of astrologers who've been posting clickbait, in my opinion, that the US is always at war during Uranus and Gemini. And they scare people with that. They point to Ukraine and such, and to our constantly sword rattling chief executive. But the truth is that the wars began when Uranus was in Taurus. They ended when it moved into Gemini. And I suggest to you that we are at war right now, but it's not the old-timey hot war. This is a war of memes, of tech, of propaganda, and of election and economic manipulation. And it has been impacting our lives in devastating ways. So that war is going to become more obvious and will reach resolution, I believe, during this Uranus and Gemini period, because Uranus and Gemini allows us to look at the various opinions and to weigh them and to find ways to compromise. That's something that was just impossible with Uranus and Taurus, because Uranus and Taurus was all about my way is the only way and stubbornly avoiding giving any legitimacy to opposing points of view. That's obviously unsustainable and will no longer be in accordance with the astrological atmosphere. Unfortunately, the atmosphere of all the astrological aspects and outer planetary placements during this time that Dabney just mentioned has been supported by the astrology. We'll look at that momentarily. So now let's look at July, because this is something really incredible, and I really don't know, as I said, how this will manifest itself, but we have never seen in our lifetime such an incredible array of fantastic aspects involving mostly the outer planets. It's breathtaking.
So, Ronnie, can I quick before we move on to
Yeah,
July? I know that April has just this incredible stellium of Aries planets,
true.
which Aries is dramatic. It's fireworks. It's the shadow of Aries is bullying and violence, and the shadow of Aries can be anger and explosiveness. The high side of Aries really is loyalty, and it is new solutions, and it's action, and it's empowerment
Hmm.
and awakening in a lot of ways. Like you said, the fog is being lifted.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts about this huge stellium, and what you're anticipating? And I'm not asking you to
Yeah, I
you.
think I think first of all you're going to see everything heat up. Like the resistance, the weather's going to start to get warmer. I think that the administration is going to be running scared, so they're going to be acting out more dramatically and more aggressively, and they will be surprised to find that the resistance is as aggressive. I don't personally think that aggression will be the way out because unfortunately, this is the way that these kinds of regimes operate. They try to goad us into um, reactions that are aggressive so that they can claim that there's chaos and then they can tighten their control. But I think even if they do that, it's not going to work in the way they expect. I mean, let's face it, even as many ICE officers that they've got out there and as much money as they're funneling in there, they don't have enough people to really handle the millions upon millions upon millions of people who are against what is happening and who want to see change. And so I think if anything, that what will happen is that for those who are trying to cause autocratic coercion, this Aries moment is going to make them overstep as they've been doing. And every time they do this, they actually invoke their own downfall because they horrify more people. Even some among their own followers start to look and say, this is not working. But also, I think that all that Aries positioning is about some kind of rebirth. Now, what is that event? It has something to do with Uranus entering Gemini. It could be information. It could be that even though it seems like right now, for example, the whole Epstein file crisis is exploding, that we may not really see until April the incredibly dramatic moment, a moment when there is just undeniable proof of corruption and something that even maybe even an action taken to prevent us from being able to get at that information, but it gets out anyway in an unexpected way. And so, one thing about Uranus and Gemini is you're talking about people who, for instance, will leak information, unexpected. I wonder, for example, already even if some of these unredacted files that made it into the most recent Epstein dump are deliberate, that there are people working in justice who wanted us to see this and who therefore left things unredacted that certainly the administration would have wanted redacted because they had had enough. And I think that that's just the beginning. I think there's going to be so much leaking and whistleblowing and so much information coming to the surface. And that Aries, while it will increase the anger and will put us more into an adversarial position, is also a wake-up call, and it's a refreshed energy. It's a spring when people rise up and they have had enough and they demand that something be done. And so I think that one thing I would suggest is when April comes around, once again, don't spend a whole lot of time arguing with people online or, like I said, posting laughing emojis. Like put this energy to good work. Find ways that you can be effective in your community or online. Find ways to emphasize individuality, find people who are doing work or organizations that are doing work that you admire and find ways to support them. By all means, get out there and protest if that's what you are feeling. Participate in strikes because there probably will be strikes at some point again. And also about Aries, youth. Aries is about youth. And again, we'll get into Sagittarius and Pluto generation, but find ways to support young people. These poor kids have grown up in a shitstorm, and they are going to be the ones who ultimately will save the republic. It's going to take a long time to bring it back and to improve it. Let's start now. Let's start to find ways to encourage them to be hopeful. For parents and others who are around kids, remember how terrifying all this is. I mean, the Epstein stuff, I mean, can you imagine being a girl now? I mean, these things were always going on, but they were going on in this sort of tolerated, surreptitious way. Now they fill the feed. And there's so much hostility and anger and derision directed at young people. Let's not be consumed by our own stress and by our own depression in reaction to all this, thereby making it seem even more dire to young people. Let's cultivate a more tranquil attitude and be encouraging and find ways to help them become who they're meant to be. And
That's
I,
a really good point. I have a 14-year-old boy, and he's definitely feeling it. And I know that they all are sharing things on Discord and different platforms, and they're very aware of the news. They're very aware of what's
Hmm.
happening, and they do feel helpless.
Hmm.
They are confused why the people who are supposed to be in charge, who historically have kept at least a facade of accountability for misdeeds, are just throwing up their hands and propaganda and gaslighting. So I think that that's a really good reminder. And before we move on to July, I just want to reiterate what you said because I do think that this is important, is that yes, this is a challenging time. People are prone to depression right now. I know I feel it myself. Keep in mind this goes back to the when will it end, okay? We've got a little bit more Uranus in the last degrees of Taurus, even though we've got Neptune and Saturn moving into Aries, which is going to bring some new, fresh energy and allow us to kind of um, exercise some of the demons that invaded our body during this heavy Piscean time. That Uranus and Taurus is still going to be have its hooks in us a little bit. So what Ronnie's sort of saying is like, hang in there. So I just wanted to kind of
Yeah.
reiterate that because I think it's an important point. So back over to you.
Okay. Absolutely. That is a good point. And so what we're really looking at is from now through April, we still have a difficult circumstance. Not as difficult as it was, say, last year, but it's challenging. It's really not the time to be surging forward. We have to kind of gain a feeling for the new playing field that we're going to be on. So July is when we really start to see these massive changes. As I mentioned, a series of aspects that is quite astonishing. So let's look at them. So on July the 15th, we have Uranus sextile Neptune exact. And this, I think, indicates a dramatically improved collective attitude. I have no idea what inspires it. Um, and I do know that even positive aspects can have negative potential. For this one, the negative potential could be like new high-tech propaganda and fakery, a summer that is remembered for just how spectacular the illusions and the delusions became. But this sextile also offers liberation and a new beginning to the collective mood and ideology, a new approach to spirituality. It does not favor the old-fashioned, look, we're going to force you to be Christian. I mean, they're talking about having Sharia-like laws where you have to go to church on Sunday, and if you don't, you're penalized with taxes. And perhaps you've heard that the Heritage Foundation has proposed that women who are 30 years old and don't have kids should be fined essentially with a higher tax. All that stuff, which flew pretty well with the old astrology, is not going to fly with the new astrology, which definitely favors freedom and individuality. So, one thing we can do with this Uranus sextile Neptune, if you're a creative person, find new tech that liberates you. There may be innovations that we have not heard about yet that will transform social media or will begin to. So, for example, I know someone who's been working on a blockchain-based community. These kind of developments are meant deliberately to kill the exploitative models that have strangled what was once a liberating technology. And when you speak to people, like this person that I know who used to be an executive at Facebook, they say that it's inevitable that Facebook will be essentially a graveyard within a few years because these new social media sites will make it onto the market and they will address all of our issues. We will not be pushed around and by the algorithms. We will not be treated like serfs when we're on our social media. We will not be pitted against each other. All the things that we're suffering from now are being addressed by brilliant people who see the problem as an opportunity and not just an opportunity to improve our experience and to improve society, but an opportunity to make a lot of money because there is this pent up desire to get out of these existing technologies. Right now, we're sort of forced, if we want to engage, to be places we don't want to be. So, for example, I am on Substack, even though I don't like who owns Substack, because Substack is useful. But the minute that somebody invents something like Substack that isn't owned by somebody I find odious, I'm out. And you've seen this just happen when TikTok was acquired by an American owner, and they began to censor news about Epstein and censor criticism about Trump, and there was a huge exodus of young people off of the platform. So in today's climate, I mean, once a better opportunity comes up, or when we find that a particular platform becomes unusable, it's pretty quick when people decide that it's no longer relevant. And I think that we can definitely, during Uranus and Gemini, expect to see new alternatives. So we want to keep our eyes open for that. And we also want to realize that the platforms we're using now are not permanent, that they are a representative of a period in American history where exploitation was allowed to run rampant. But that will not be how it continues. So 3 days later, after this Uranus sextile Neptune, we will have Uranus trine Pluto. And that will happen again on November 29th. There is negative potential, even with a trine. There could be some kind of example of modern warfare or terrorism, the use of new tech in destructive ways. But the trine is really about breaking down authoritarian control of society, about regaining freedom, independence, and individuality. And I think that there are young geniuses out there who will game these complex systems of control and surveillance and find ways to make them backfire on those who would use them against the people. This authoritarian impulse will be challenged by the different, the forces that don't recognize the hierarchies of political and economic power. That's an American tradition, and we haven't been seeing very much of it during this difficult astrology. People have had enough of seeing the faces of corrupt elites, and with great cleverness and quickness, they will set about making a better world. I mean, are you like me? We just can't stand to see Epstein and Trump's faces anymore, you know? I think that everybody, who's sane is feeling that way. And there will be a way of addressing this that will be developed through technology. It will be resisted. But with Pluto in Aquarius, the authoritarian trends of Pluto in Capricorn will come to an end. There's just no doubt about it. I mean, Aquarius is the corrective to Capricorn in a sense. There are astrologers out there who are saying that Aquarius is very similar to Capricorn. They were both ruled by Saturn in the old astrology. But I'm someone with a lot of Aquarius in my chart, and I lived for a long time with someone I love dearly who had a lot of Capricorn placements. And I assure you, the differences are very significant and very obvious. And there will no comparison between Pluto and Capricorn, which is authoritarian and strict and very into scenarios involving austerity and such. And Pluto in Aquarius is about innovation, independence, collective efforts, freedom, equality. Very different. Pluto in Capricorn, all about elites controlling power any way that they can. Also on Jupiter 20th, on July 20th, we've got Jupiter trine Neptune and Jupiter opposition Pluto, both exact. The opposition could indicate economic disruptions and further erosion of government institutions, especially the judiciary. You could see a controversial judicial decision. But it could also indicate the judiciary and other parts of the government rising to the occasion to oppose authoritarian policies. They might surprise us. The good news is that Jupiter trine Neptune, which first of all, again, supports the idea of new approaches, more optimistic approaches to spirituality, a wider sense of compassion in society. And the fact that it happens on the same day, I think this heralds a change in the zeitgeist. New leadership, a more optimistic collective mood, Again, I'm not sure how this happens, but I think that there will be a rejection of what's been going on in a way that gives hope to us all in July. And then we have on the next day another supportive sextile that bodes well for positive change, which is Jupiter sextile Uranus. And this could be a resistance that coalesces around new leadership. I think we're going to see new leaders. I'm not at all certain that, for instance, on the Democratic side, that the people who are being discussed are going to be discussed later this year. I think that we're going to see new leadership rise up and the desire for that and a rejection of this kind of centrist approach of trying to appeal to what is really at this point a non-existent center. So it could be a weakening of the current administration in some way that triggers a rebirth. I have no clue what that looks like, but certainly something happens in July that brings about a greater optimism. And then, as I mentioned, on the 21st, we have Jupiter sextile Uranus, which will be exact. And that is all about innovation and again about liberation and the expansion of the progressive, the expansion of optimism. This is about youth and inventiveness and a wave of wanting the new, the different, the future instead of the past. In our own lives, a time to seek release from the burdens of this ponderous set of cycles ending now. So, picture yourself breathing easier. It's not that the challenges are going to go away magically or that reasons for fear will just disappear, but we will know that the wind is in our sails and that evolution is inevitable. And then to crown July, we get the North Node entering Aquarius. Yet another Aquarian thing, because we still have the North Node in Pisces all the way through most of July. And the North Node is sort of the direction of society. So that means that despite all these changes, on some level, the ship of state remains locked in Pisces, and in um, that's sort of old-fashioned approach. And the last time that we had this shift was when we saw the Great Recession, the subprime mortgage bubble popped. But I think that was more to do with the shift from the money talks and BS walks optimism of Pluto and Sagittarius to the Saturnian pessimism of Pluto and Capricorn. That the real collapse came in 2008, right after Pluto went into Capricorn, and all that the market's going to go up forever, and no one will ever have a problem with subprimes. All that optimism disappeared. At the same time, of course, this means that we're going to have a South Node in Leo, which is somewhat self-centered and egotistical. It means that that kind of self-centered, egotistical leadership will begin to fall out of favor. The North Node in Aquarius emphasizes community. It emphasizes, again, individuality, humanitarian efforts, innovation in all areas of life. The unconventional is appreciated again. The futuristic is embraced. And it has very little to do with what we're seeing today. So it will be a major change. And you can see we have all this movement from positions that are supportive of the mess that we're in to positions that are really quite different and no longer support it. So I want to take a quick look at election day, which I think could indicate good news, especially for women and young people. The aspects that are nearest exact on election day in 2026 are Venus retrograde, sextile Jupiter, and Sun conjunct Mercury. Now, some astrologers have pointing at that Venus retrograde and suggesting that that's bad news for women. That it could indicate that there's some kind of a surprise loss in the election, or that there's a successful effort to manipulate the election. Certainly, every effort will be made to manipulate the election. But I would suggest we have to remember that the current status quo is bad news for women. And retrograding means a return to an atmosphere where women's rights were upheld. So the efforts by authoritarians to talk their way out of the truth continue, with the sun representing leadership, overriding Mercury in that conjunction, communication. So you can expect bluster. We won, you know. But the sextile indicates a potentially joyful time for women and for younger generations. So if you look at it as empowerment, the sun, of the young, Mercury. And now we're going to talk about the Pluto and Sagittarius generation. With Saturn and Neptune entering fire signs, and therefore trining the generation that has natal Pluto in Sagittarius, and with Pluto continuing to sextile their natal Plutos, plus Jupiter in a supportive trine from Leo, and Uranus, and the US Uranus return, because the United States is about to have a Uranus return to replace that Pluto return. Uranus will be opposing their Plutos in Sagittarius, which will awaken and stimulate their Plutos. I think this is the year that Pluto in Sagittarius generation begins to flex its power in a big way. The elders of this generation will be turning 31 this year, and the youngest will turn 18 and will be able to vote this year. Because this is a fire sign, it resonates to some degree with Pluto in Leo, which we now think of as the baby boomers, but this was, when they were young, the revolutionary hippie generation. Of course, the majority never went for that ride, but the ones who did radically changed society. And we should see something similar. The difference is that Leo, Pluto in Leo, is very, look at me, aren't I great? I always think of Mick Jagger wearing his Leo shirt. He was a Leo. You know, worship me. Sagittarius is not like that. Sagittarius, while they're always convinced that they're right, and I have a lot of Sagittarius, so I know. Sagittarius loves freedom above all, and Sagittarius will take a lot. You know, they'll let you push them around, and they'll ignore what's going on if they can still have independence in the way they want it. If they can get their traveling in, if they can have their circle of friends, if they can have a good time, they'll put up with an awful lot. But when you begin to crimp that, and you put obstacles in their way, and God help them if they do a draft, I mean, forget it then. I mean, you'll see something revolutionary from this generation. Um, Pluto in Sagittarius, you could literally describe as willing to die for freedom. This is the placement of give me liberty or give me death. And I'm not saying that this indicates violence, although these major planets in fire signs could stimulate anger and impatience and may spark conflict and aggressive protests. I think, though, that with the US 250th anniversary, and with a July 4th happening this summer, that is going to be an orchestrated, I mean, I don't know if you saw the incredible, ridiculous mess of the Kid Rock Turning Point alternative to the Super Bowl show. I mean, everything this administration does is just laughable. So expect their celebration of the 4th of July to rub everybody who really cares about America the wrong way. But at the same time, to awaken the spirit of what we want America to be. And so I think the battle for the soul of America will be on, and young people are heavily favored to win with all of this astrology. And also, we have just under them, the kids who are at the oldest right now are 17. This is the Pluto and Capricorn generation. And they are the first of what in astrology we call the fourth quadrant. That is the last three signs of the zodiac. And traditionally, whether true or not, souls that are born into these last three quadrants, particularly with their Plutos, are a higher level. And these Pluto and Capricorn kids, they're like little adults already. And they are seeing all of this and digesting it and talking amongst themselves. And they know how to keep their mouths shut, and they know how to be organized and structured. And the Sagittarius elder siblings are likely to burst out with a great action of we want liberty. We are philosophical about these things, and we're tired of old people, very Sagittarius. But the Capricorn kids are the ones that will probably really clean up the mess. They're the ones who are going to have the will and the focus to go in there and to surgically correct and update America. Now we have the beginning of the US Uranus return, which we will have not exact, but we'll have the influence of for this 4th of July in 2026. And this is the question being posed to every single American. What is freedom to you? What does independence mean to you? What does equality mean to you? And what does the future mean to us? This is going to be very different than the mood that we've been in. You know, this Plutonian, most of this stuff began to really fester with Pluto and Capricorn. So the narrative was, this is how it is, and you know, if you don't like it, who cares? These are the ugly facts about life. No, the Uranus return is going to be, we don't like this interpretation of America. We want to look back at the Declaration of Independence. We want to discover that the Declaration of Independence and the planet Uranus really represent the same thing, the rights of the individual. And so the rights of the individual will be taking center stage again. And we will be asked to redefine and to use technology in order to support the rights of the individual rather than destroy it. I expect that this Uranus return will see, is another indication that we will see new platforms, new social media, new technology that will address all of this repulsive exploitation that has occurred, that has taken the internet, which was, whatever its origins, in the early days, it was a very liberating thing. I'll give you one example from my life. I could not have written the books that I wrote these days because when I wrote them, the main parts of them, both Amazon and Google allowed you to search every page of every book that they had. And so I was able to search very expensive academic books that I couldn't afford to buy and find everything that I needed. It was amazing. But since then, the philosophy changed. And now you can't do that. Why? There's an effort to control the information in order to squeeze a little extra money out for the bottom line. And that just holds back thought. It holds back the ability to really use this technology that is hugely helpful if you allow it to be. And that's just one tiny example of ways that the freedom of the internet has been curtailed and used to control us instead of liberate us. So I think that 2026 is a year for cultivating individuality and independence. I think it's going to be a really wild ride. Like I said, from here at this low point of Saturn Neptune with Uranus still in Taurus, we can't really imagine what these changes are going to be. We can't really see what these reasons for optimism, rebirth, and renaissance might be. But there is no question that they are indicated in this incredible year of new placements and of phenomenal sextiles and trines. There is a motivation for cultural evolution that is dramatically different than what we've been living through. And we even see this supported by Chinese astrology, where we're moving from the always problematic year of the snake, a time of molting, to a time of power and progress with the year of the fire horse. That is, that the further you push the pendulum of politics in one direction, the further it will swing to the other. And if you look at the demographics, young people remain overwhelmingly against this administration and its right-wing policies, despite the efforts of all the influencers supported by oligarchs and by well-organized right-wing social engineering to convert them. You know, you've got influencers out there trying to teach young men to mistreat women and that women are useless, and I mean all kinds of crazy stuff. And there's millions of kids who are listening to this and trying to live that way and will have bitter experiences as a result. But there are many more millions who never bought into it and who actually reject this whole atmosphere that's been artificially created by the right in order to maintain control and to try to reestablish patriarchy. So the growing, this Pluto and Sagittarius generation, the Pluto and Capricorn kids who are going to be able to start voting next year. These generations are really what I see as the rescuers, those who are going to reinvent the republic in the 21st century. And it's up to us to give them the materials to do that, to get them excited about. I mean, this is silly, but I mean, take a moment to read some of Kennedy's better speeches or to listen to them or Lincoln, or like make sure that your kids hear this stuff, that they get some of this amazing American heritage, the beautiful words about freedom and about independence that have been said by great Americans, and that they understand that what they're dealing with right now, that's the American shadow. That is not that's not the America that we want or that we can have. And yes, America has been deeply flawed throughout its history. It's always had this kind of shadow empire thing going on. But we're dealing with it. We have to deal with it. And we still have the ideal that America represented. And that ideal, I think, will be in their hands. And I also want to say, we really need strong women and strong allies for women. Um, the Heritage Foundation has followed up Project 2025 with a new plan. It's a long-term plan. They're going after our daughters and our granddaughters. They want to make it hard for them to get an education. They want to make birth control and divorce hard to get. They want young women to be raising babies under the dominion of their husbands like in the good old days. We must vote them into oblivion. So we can support women, gay people, people of color, however we can. We must meet the smug, false certainty of the right and their commitment to dominating our lives with an unrelenting independence, with a love of freedom and a fierce dedication to resisting their meddling. Posting online isn't enough, even though it's important to share information. We need to gather our wits, our courage, our strength, and look for ways that we can infuse our lives and our children with self-determination. Each of us is born with talents that are uniquely ours. Find them. Put them to work in your life, in your family, in your community. Become who you were meant to be. That's the best way of teaching. If we can do that, if we can blossom, if we can become the best that we can be and truly what we came here to do, accomplishing our missions, as it were, because we chose to be here during this time, that's the best way to teach future generations, that they can do that too. So we need to make safe spaces, spaces where people can become who they were meant to be, beginning with our homes. And this new astrology is all about individuality. The love of the Capricorn Pisces era, that kind of love was conditional, transactional, haunted by religious guilt and inhibition, which so easily leads to a lust to control other people. Aquarius Aries is the opposite. It's about not letting anyone tell you what to be. It's about being you and letting others be what they are. And that's the essence of American history. I have studied the alternative history of America very deeply and do not believe when you're told that this was a strictly Christian and uniform country. It never was. From the very beginning, it was a country filled with individuals, people who wanted to be who they were, not what people told them to be. But as Dabney pointed out, this is not the right time to rush out. We still have Saturn conjunct Neptune to deal with. We still have Uranus in Taurus in its stubborn, disruptive state. So this is a time, I believe, for quiet, a time to collect strength, to feel what is awakening in the hearts of true sons and daughters of liberty. The patriarchy dares to use that word. They fetishize it. They try to dominate us with it, to gaslight us into believing their false definition of it. But you know what? That word liberty, it belongs to the people. It belongs to us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ronnie. Did you have any final thoughts, or I think that's a good place to wrap up, but you let me know.
I think so.
Okay. And while you were talking, I did want to kind of just give some people, so I tend to like to wrap up any astrology reading that I do with cards.
Hmm.
And so I said, what do people need to know about this talk that Ronnie's giving? And the very first card I picked was good fortune. Okay. And so I'm just gonna good fortune. I just want to read it because I think it really wraps this up nicely. In ancient Egypt, the scarab beetle was a sacred symbol of good fortune, rebirth, and protection from jealousy. This card indicates prosperity and long-term success. It could also mean a miracle. This, however, is not passive fortune. Now is the time to formulate new ideas about the path you want to follow. Decide what you're interested in and take action because luck is on your side. This card can ease the hard work that needs to be done to get to the finish line, but it's up to you to see yourself through. Don't forget to celebrate your successes. And then I picked one more and I got koi fish. There's always enough. And it's basically the same card, right? So it can be used in numerous ways, but ultimately looking at it as a long-term beneficial relationship. So I think we have to have a long-term relationship and look at this as the big picture of what's been happening is for our highest good, even though it has felt so uncomfortable. And so I think, if you watch my channel often, Ronnie's saying a lot of the same things that I say. And he's, putting it in his own brilliant articulation and bringing in historical thoughts. But the energy is that of, yes, we have to see this. Yes, this is painful. And it's for our higher good because we've got somewhere better to go. So I want people to just kind of hang on to that message as we kind of round out the end of this sort of like slogging through and know that we do have some energy of change coming very soon. And we're already starting to see it, and it's just right on cue.
Hmm.
So, I mean, you can just follow this astrology. It is right on cue. So thank you so much, Ronnie,
You're
for
welcome.
your time.
My pleasure.
Please do check out Ronnie's work. Again, I will have his Substack, his Instagram, and his YouTube links below. You can check out his books. Also, if you are interested in that workshop on the Saturn Neptune conjunction, where we're going to have, kind of a collective healing, collective meditation. Um, I don't have the page to sign up for that yet, so just sign up for my emails, which I don't spam people on a regular basis. I just let you know when I have workshops coming up or if there's some, special event or discount. And so that link for that will be below. So, thank you again, Ronnie. I'm appreciative. Any other final words before we wrap up?
No, I mean, maybe I just want to say to everybody, take heart and have faith. You are a soul having an experience in an impermanent world, and you are connected to divine sources of inspiration. So find that in yourself and bring it into the world, and you will be amazed by what can happen.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, I hope you come back in June if your schedule allows, because I think by then we'll live in actually a much different world, and we'll be preparing for that July timeframe that you were talking about. And I think that that would be fascinating to discuss with you at that
Okay, that sounds good.
time. Okay, everyone watching, there's a reason and a season for it all. The universe is conspiring to help you. So hang in there, stargazers. Till next time.